Leah Johns, it's a pleasure to have you here in this beautiful city of Porto. I will start by asking you, who is Leah Johns? What are you currently focusing on? And how will consumers behave in 2035?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I lead Bain & Company's Global Consumer Lab, and we focus on what consumers do, but also why they do it. And so over the last year or so, I've been focusing on the future and looking at societal shifts and macro forces and shifting consumer expectations. And what we see emerge are 8 big themes, or what we call future consumer economies. So what we know, for example, is that people will continue moving between countries and continents and within cities in different ways than they did in the past. Families are changing shape and size. So single-person households are actually the fastest growing households globally. We also know that the population is aging. So the population over 60 is growing 6 times faster than the population under 60, 6 times faster. People care more about sustainability than they have in the past, and they're looking to lower their impact on the environment and actively making choices to do so. If we look at the path that we take in life, it's no longer linear anymore. So in the future, people will not do school and university and take a job as maybe our parents or grandparents did, or we did. People will continue to really focus on health, and they define health more broadly than they did in the past. And then lastly, we know that people continue to feel very time poor. They look to technology to solve that problem, but ultimately, all of this technology that's connecting us makes people feel less connected and lonely. So all of these themes have implications on future generations, but ultimately how businesses can serve consumers and should serve consumers in the future.
So how will sustainability as a key concern of future consumers will affect the future of buildings?
So consumers really care and are concerned actually about sustainability. So we did research that showed 65% of people globally said that they were either very or extremely concerned about 65 environmental sustainability. And we can only expect that to continue. So people are looking at ways to lower their impact on the environment. Whether that is avoiding consumption, so being closer to close-knit communities, the way that our grandparents lived, and sharing things instead of buying their own. But they also recognize the importance of being close to nature. And so there's a Dutch greenery researcher created this 3-30-300 rule, where effectively he says in the future, people should be able to see 3 trees from their house. Their neighborhood should be covered 30% by tree canopy, and that they should not be more than 300 meters from a green space.
That's a challenge.
It is, but people also understand how that's related to health. So interestingly, in the UK, the National Health Service, they say if they write more green prescriptions, so telling people to go out into nature, that they can actually save 650 million pounds a year. So there's a huge benefit to this. So in the future, what does this mean for buildings? It means understanding that consumers want to lower the impact of the buildings that they live in and the way that they live, but also understand the health benefits of being close to nature and seeing green in their lives.
Will the rerouted economy have an impact on cities and buildings?
Yes, absolutely. So when we talk about the rerouted economy, we talk about the fact that people are moving differently and they're moving more flexibly than they were in the past. And that has huge implications on where real estate will need to be. If we think about it before the pandemic, we went from our houses to our workplaces and maybe to a restaurant, and then we went back to our houses. And we did that Monday through Friday every single week. And now that's very different. People are sometimes working from home, and they are moving around in different ways than they were in the past. This, of course, has implications on where commercial real estate needs to be. So where is retail, where are office spaces, because you need to be where the people are. The other 2 economies that I would mention that have implications on this are the redefined family, so the fact that single-person households are a growing type of household, as well as the emotional support economy. So people are looking for community. So I think the real unlock here for city planning and for real estate planning is how can we learn from the ancestral wisdom of our grandparents, for example, and recreate the village in such a way that we build community, we are where the consumers want to be, and we also are able to support people whether they're living by themselves or whether they're living with others.
So they are focusing a little bit more in cities. What challenge will cities face as they adapt to the needs and expectations of future consumers?
So they'll face challenges not only meeting the expectation of consumers, but also obviously meeting macro forces such as changing regulation, climate change, migration, as I was mentioning. The thing about the future in cities is that they will need to start thinking about themselves a little bit more like a business. So how do you attract people to live in your city? Now there's reasons for this, right? First is that the population is declining. So there's going to be fewer of us in the future. And so how do you have people move to your city? But also the things that used to tie us to one place, so home ownership, being close to friends and family, and your job, have all declined and changed in terms of what's, none of those things really tie us to a place anymore. So if you want to think like a business, you have to think, okay, what are the consumer needs? Well, there's community, as I mentioned earlier. There's also the need for health, so being closer and have accessible healthcare, but also convenience. And so when cities are thinking about the future, what are the different mobility and accessibility options that consumers are going to need in the future?
My last question, considering the conservative nature of the real estate sector, what advice would you give to the industry today?
Okay, there are macro trends, as I mentioned before, that are necessary to track. So you have to be ahead of demographic changes, the aging population, income shifts, et cetera. But it's also really important to understand consumer expectations, and those expectations will come from outside of the real estate sector. So if we think about you as a human, your expectations aren't just you as a tenant or you as a shopper or a walking wallet. They're influenced by all of the other things in your life. So how personalized your playlist is, how fast your groceries are delivered, all of those expectations get shifted between sectors. Now, tactically, I think surveys are great, but at the end of the day, you really have to speak to consumers. You have to understand why they say what they do. And also, people don't always do what they say, not because they have bad intentions, but just because people are idiosyncratic. And so really understanding those consumer needs and those consumer expectations, it requires sitting down, just like I am with you, and talking to people. So that's what I would recommend.
Well, thank you very much, Leah. I think this was very interesting and very useful, and I'm sure it will be also for the sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you.